Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. We've been away for a few weeks and the garden has certainly moved into another stage. It's been blissfully wet for the last 3 weeks now, and that means everything's greened up. We haven't got the sort of arid desiccation that we had last summer. And it's entered a new season. We have a new palette, a new range of plants, and these will last right through into autumn. And this is a time of year that Longmeadow revels in. But the thing which is not looking particularly spectacular, but which is giving me as much pleasure as anything, are these citrus plants, which suffered horribly on one night in December when the temperature here dropped down to -16, -17. And it looked as though they'd all died. But I put them in the greenhouse, gave them a bit of TLC, and here they are, they're growing back. And I'm giving them their weekly feed. This is liquid seaweed. There's no point in making it too strong, just gives them a little bit of a boost. No fruit this year because they fruit on the previous year's growth. But the way they're going, I think I should be harvesting lemons from them again next spring. Now, coming up on today's programme. Adam meets a couple who've spent decades transforming a Yorkshire farmyard into a glorious garden despite hostile conditions.
You're not far from the coast, it blows a gale, and it's freezing cold in the winter.
It's certainly cold, yeah.
So when you decide that actually we're going to create a rose garden?
Sue is sprucing up her garden so that it stays looking fresh well into late summer and autumn.
Asian veg are great for this time of year because they're hardy, they'll run through to winter, and they don't easily bolt.
We discover the challenges faced by two gardeners working in an extraordinary location on a cliff edge in Penzance.
It's really exposed and the soil is free draining, poor acidic soil. And the plants that we grow have to grow slowly, they have to grow tough.
And I will be harvesting potatoes and planting out spring brassicas. You can take cuttings from spring right through till winter, but now is the best time. There are a number of different types of cuttings. There are softwood cuttings, which tend to be taken earlier in the year. There are semi-ripe cuttings, which are really coming into play now. And another type, which is not very often used, but is very useful for certain types of plants, and those are internodal cuttings. Nodal is simply the point at which leaves appear on the stem. And normally with a cutting, you cut underneath a pair of leaves. But internodal means cutting between a pair of leaves. And it's really useful for plants like clematis. What you need to look for is a stem that doesn't have flowers at the moment. This looks promising. Yeah, there we are. We can use this. So if I cut here, there. Now I'll get two cuttings from this, like that. Pop these in a bag just to keep them fresher and try and do it without damaging them. And while I'm here, I will take some semi-ripe cuttings. Now, salvias take very well from cuttings. If I take a stem without a flower at the top, now that is really good cutting material because there's no flower bud and yet plenty of healthy growth. Pop it in the bag. And that I can take along with the internodal cutting from the clematis, ready to pot up. Right. I'll do these clematis cuttings first. So what I'll do here, and I'll use a sharp knife, is take off one side completely, like that. I will take that off there. And actually, I'm going to take this one off too. And what I'm left with is a cutting with a bit of leaf that will feed the roots when they develop, and it's tied up the top. And we will use a very, very loose mix. Now, this is important. Don't just stick it into claggy compost and expect it to take, because what cuttings need is oxygen and water. They don't need any nutrition at all for the roots to form. And this is where perlite works really well, because it aids drainage yet holds some water. And we can pop that in there like that. And I'll prepare the other one. Take off the top. And again, I'm going to remove that, and I think that. And this is a little bit on the short side, but we'll pop this in there like that, and that should take. I will water that and put it somewhere warm and light, but not in the full glare of midday sun. And that should form roots in about 2 to 4 weeks. Semi-ripe cuttings, which we've done many times before. Now what we want to do with this is remove most of the foliage like that. And in fact, what I do is take that one off too. And then I will clean that up, cutting beneath a node, just there. And that's the most likely point for roots to form from. And we'll pop that in like that. Right, I will water these and put them in the greenhouse. Now, we're off to visit Sue in her garden in Swansea, just to see how it's getting on after all the work that she put in earlier in the year.
I always feel there's still loads to do to refresh the garden as the early season flowers start to fade. So I have some ideas today to manage and enhance my planting to last through to the first frosts. Earlier this year, I created these containers using pillows underneath the soil and unrotted kitchen waste, and they've done really well. The strawberries are coming along. I've harvested a lot of the beetroot, and these I'm keeping for their leaves. And in May, I visited the Heritage Seed Library, and I was given some dwarf beans. We chose them to work in my wet and windy climate. And although they've been eaten by slugs, they have produced quite a lot of beans. They're coming along nicely. They also gave me this asparagus lettuce. I only had one and it bolted before I could pick it. But I was going to take it out and have decided to let it flower, and I'm going to collect the seeds so I'll have more for next year. Now I can see my cucumber is looking for a fight with me. In this tub there are 2 heritage cucumbers, King of the Ridge, and I want them to grow around this upside down tomato cage so that I can harvest them easily. They've got these self-clinging tendrils, but just to make sure they grow in the direction that I want them to, I'm going to sort of fasten in the stem with a string. There's one tiny cucumber under here, but it's hidden by the leaves, and I'm worried that the insects won't find all the flowers that are also under here. They won't get pollinated and I won't get cucumbers. So I'm going to take the leaves off right by the flowers so the insects can hopefully find them. And then I'm going to end up with lots of cucumbers. Well, that's the plan. I'm so pleased with these raised beds that I built some more on a much bigger scale. The trees in this area suck all the nutrients out of the ground, so I need a raised bed to grow veg. Filling a large bed like this is quite expensive, so I use a method similar to hugelculture, which is creating a raised bed with logs and branches and garden waste. It's a really good way of tidying up. Then I put a layer of wood chip, and then I've added a good layer of soil. I've lined it with plastic to stop anything falling out and to help retain water. And now it's ready to sow. I've got tatsoi, mitsuna, both like quite a shady place to grow. They only need a few hours of sunlight. And then I've got daikon, which is a radish and needs a bit more sun, so I'm putting at this end. Asian veg are great for this time of year because they're hardy, they'll run through to winter, and they don't easily bolt. So this is tatsoi. Now tatsoi is a bit like pak choi, but a bit sweeter. and it'll be ready in about 40 to 45 days. You can use it raw in salads or in stir fries. Another advantage of having all this rottingness going on underneath is it produces heat, which heats the soil and can prolong the growing season. Mizuna is a sort of mustardy flavoured Asian veg, and you can grow it in its early stages for its leaves for salad, but when it gets a bit older, you can use it for stir fry, and it only takes about 45 days to mature, so it's a really quick crop. I'm going to put the daikon in here. Now, that needs slightly bigger trench, and this is like a large radish. It's slightly less peppery, and it can grow up to 20 centimetres. It's very exciting. And the thing that I'm interested in doing is maybe pickling it. The other great thing about the system that I'm using here is that the logs act like sponges, and they absorb water, and then they release it in times of drought. So I shouldn't have to water it unless I've got a very dry period. Pluses all round, I think. I partly replanted this border in the autumn, and I'm really very pleased. I'm loving the way the lavender and the scabious bob in the wind, and the pops of colour from the drumstick alliums. I've got lots of flowers to choose from to pick and take into the house. Sweet scabious is the darling of my garden. It keeps flowering from about June to November, as long as I keep deadheading it. And it just produces masses of flowers, which makes it absolutely super for the house, because you can cut them and know they're going to come again. And it wafts in the wind and it lights up at night. I absolutely adore this plant. I've underplanted these roses with Erigeron sea breeze, which is rather apt because I have a garden full of sea breezes. And the lovely purple picks up the purple of the drumstick allium. And they do add daisies into this part of the garden, and I love daisies. I've a few little jobs to do. Harvest some basil, which I've grown in a cold frame. This would normally be redundant over the summer, but basil thrives in heat, so this is the perfect use for it. I've wrapped chicken wire around the pergola so that the beans can go around in circles to keep them at a level that I can reach to harvest. I'm growing the heritage variety Q Blue, and the beans look extremely edible. I've got a lovely little job I want to do at the end of my day. I've got an abundance of diascia, and I thought I'd jolly up the side of my shed a bit with them. So I'm going to use a metal container because it suits me. It's lightweight, but it can get very hot. So by placing a pot within a pot, there's air to circulate around. I've got the hooks here, and I'm just going to lift them into position and see what they look like. There, they fit lovely. And also I've got a water trough here, so it's easy to keep them watered. But look at them, aren't they beautiful? The lovely colours of summer.
I think there is a kind of feeling at this time of year that things are dying back and summer is drawing slightly to an end. That really isn't the case, certainly not in terms of the garden. We've got a lot of gardening ahead of us. The garden, in fact, certainly here at Longmeadow, picks up in August and goes through into September, and nowadays well into October. So, like Sue, sow seeds, plant plan ahead. There's a lot of gardening left. And of course, to a certain extent, there's some tidying up to do. This is garlic that I harvested about 3 weeks ago. I've kept here in the greenhouse to dry, and now getting ready to store. And you can plait them, you can hang them up, you can do all kinds of things. But over the years, we found this is as good a way as any. Just trim off the roots like that. Don't cut them right off, because you need that root plate in order for them to store well. Clean them up and just pop them in a basket. And as long as you put them somewhere cool and dark, a shed or a garage or even a cellar if you've got such a thing, they will be absolutely fine. This is a good job for a rainy day. Now, it's time to visit one of your gardens, and this is in Crawley in West Sussex.
Hello, my name is Katie, and this is my back garden, and I've got 36 roses in this very small space. This is a pale white rose, Vanessa Bell. It's very healthy and very easy to maintain. I transplanted some roses from my old house where I started growing roses 6 years ago. Some people say that looking after roses is hard work, and I think it's important to get watering right. I use 10 litres for standard tree roses and climbers, and 5 litres for all the other roses, and just increase watering slightly in hot weather conditions. This is a beautiful Halakha standard tree rose, which I bought as a bare root tree, and it arrived looking like a stick, and I planted it, and in a few months I saw first leaves, and I was so excited, but I could never believe that it will turn into such a beautiful tree in 6 years. It is so large and so tall that I need a ladder to do my deadheading and pruning and to look after it. I spend a lot of time in the garden with my kids, and this is my 2-year-old Sophie. Although my garden doesn't look child-friendly, my kids love it, and Sophie learned her colors by just looking at the tulips and naming them, and now she does the same with roses. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.
Well, Katie, I think your roses look fantastic. Absolutely lovely. And of course, I'm a huge rose fan. I grow a lot of roses here at Longmeadow, and of different types. And by and large, they're all really easy to grow and easy to look after. But at this part of the garden, I've got a lot of species roses, and they flower on the previous year's wood. Now, this rose directly behind me, this is Rosa Moisei. You grow it partly for the lovely, vibrant vermilion single flowers that spangle over it. Also, equally, for the incredible hips that the flowers produce. These are flagon-shaped rose hips and really decorative in autumn. And this has just finished flowering, and now is the perfect time to prune it. If I step in here, you can see that there is a really good green growth growing up there. Now that's fantastic, and that will be covered in flower next year. And then you've got the much older stem. If I was to trim this back, just sort of reduce it by half or 3/4, it would then sprout from where I cut it, and it would look terrible. So what you need to do when you're pruning species roses, and also it applies to ramblers, is go as low as you can without destroying the plant. So, bearing that in mind, this is what I'm going to do. I don't like wearing gloves, but I don't like being spiked by roses. Now you can see here, for example, there you've got 2 branches crossing, and they're rubbing against each other, and that's always an opportunity for disease or infection or just straight damage. So what I'm going to do is cut here like this. And it's quite hard. There we go. And what I've taken out is all of this. That is a pruning, which is quite something. Chuck that out. This is arching across the path to a degree, so I think this I can cut back relatively high. I don't want to take that right back here because I quite like the way that's arching up. But I'll go right back to that joint and cut there. There we are, that can join the other. And with all rose pruning, there is one law that is inviolable and does always apply, which is, if in doubt, leave it alone. If you're not sure what to do, don't do anything at all, because you'll do no harm. Watch how it grows, see when it flowers, and that will inform you how to prune it the following year. Now, we're going to Cornwall, to Penzance, to visit a garden in the most spectacular location that you could possibly imagine.
We're quite a unique garden that we are sort of perched on the edge of a cliff. It's really exposed and the soil is free draining, poor, acidic soil. And the plants that we grow have to grow slowly, they have to grow tough to cope with the wind in the winter, because that's our worst nemesis is the wind. So we're in the Minnock Theatre Garden and it's about a couple of miles just around the corner from Land's End in the far west of Cornwall. I'm Claire Batten, I'm a joint head gardener here at the Minnock Theatre. I've been here now for about 3 years, but been in horticulture all my life and grew up just 2 miles over the hill. The garden itself is made up of a series of raised beds, and in total it's just over an acre, but it's really intense. They're all really quite small beds, so it's just little pockets everywhere. The headland was bought by Rowena Cade in the early 20s for the sum of £100. And over those years, she started to develop a terrace garden. And then the theatre itself, and the first performance was 1932. She died in 1983. She herself did most of the work. She carried the sand up from the beach for the cement, and she was working right up until the end. This place is never finished. It's always evolving, and she was always doing something. I job share this with Jeff Rowe, who is my brother-in-law. We've worked together for over 20 years. I do a lot of the planting and plant selection, which Jeff helps me with, but he does a lot of the hard landscaping.
On the whole, we get on very, very well. We have our different opinions on our plants that we like and dislike. But yeah, on the whole, we get on really, really well.
He has a little, not a hate, but a dislike for things like a plectranthus or some of the pelargonium. So I quickly sneak that planting in on a day when he's not here.
The plectranthus, well, they're just a posh stinging nettle in my view.
When we came here, the gardens were really quite established, but it was like a pick and mix. There was plants all over the place. And so what we've been trying to do is make sense of the planting and get areas, so one area's got South African plants, one area's got aeoniums, and another just pure succulents. Just trying to make more sense of it in horticultural terms. So the predominant succulent in the garden is the aeoniums. We grow an awful lot of them and different types of them. We're really, really lucky that we don't need to have winter protection for them. But if you were to grow these in a colder area, you might want to just lay a little fleece on them just to give them a little bit of protection from the frost. A lot of the plants we grow are silver-leafed. These reflect the sunlight and also reduce the transpiration when it gets really hot. So we have things like the silver tree, the Leucodendron argentium, that's a beautiful shrub. Arctosis, lovely perennials, and Artemisia. All these silver-leafed plants do really well with us. Some of the plants say that you wouldn't think would do well, but have come out to be really hardy. We've got things like the evergreens Polygala fruticosa africana. It's a beautiful shrub from higher altitude in South Africa. and it's in flower nearly all year round. As long as it's not in the actual teeth of the wind, it does really well here for us.
So here we have an agave. This family of plants do really well here in the theatre. We're on a free draining acidic soil which they love, and on a natural slope which helps to drain the plant of any rainwater that it gets. That's a big issue with growing the agave in most parts of the country, is you don't want it to hold water in the winter. Keep them really dry and they should go down to a -10.
So here we've got an agave. It's quite an old plant, but the flower spike has shot up over the last 5 months. And once this flowers, it's died. It's called monocarpic plant, but hopefully it's sent out some pups, some little offshoots underneath. So hopefully there might be some life after death. This is the king protea. It's Protea cineroides. It's the national flower of South Africa. It's got lovely, thick, leathery leaves. And it's one of the stars of the Protea family, and we grow a lot of them here, but this one now is in full bud. The conditions it thrives in are free draining, acidic, poor soil, and that's exactly what we've got here. This is Leucadendron safari sunset. It's another member of the Protea family, and it's loving this little corner, and it's got its own microclimate, which is created by this lump of granite. The granite also gives off heat in the winter months when it's really sunny, and that lifts it at night, so it protects it, and even the tender plants thrive with this bits of granite round.
I love working in this environment. It's ever-changing. I love the outdoors, the sea, just the fresh air, and getting physical with the garden.
Even when it's blowing a hoolie, as we say down here, or it's absolutely lashing down with rain, there's never really a day when you don't think, do you know what, we're creating something really special here, and it is just a joy.
If I was to systematically devise a garden as different from Longmeadow as possible, I think it would be the Minack Theatre Garden. It has everything that I can't grow here, and I bet most of the stuff that we do grow successfully, they would struggle with. But that's fascinating, and all the more reason to go and visit it. Now, I need the protection of a greenhouse for all kinds of things in winter and in summer to grow these crops successfully. Tomatoes this year are going fine. It's not a brilliant tomato year. They're a bit slow to come through, but they're healthy. And by the way, don't worry if you get leaf curling like this. It's nearly always where you have tomatoes near a door, and it's a sign of too much variance in temperature. So there's no real harm done to the plant. Just try closing the door a bit or even opening it a bit more. We've got good chilies this year, a good wide range, and I love chilies, particularly the little green padron chilies that you eat when they're small, you quickly fry them, and they're not at all hot. What I would say is if you let them grow big and red like these, they do get distinctly pokey. They're quite spicy. I like that, but if you're expecting something as mild as the green ones, eat them small. Masses of cucumbers, and like everything else, plenty more to come. If you look after the plants, there will be a harvest from your tomatoes and your cucumbers and your chilies for months to come. Now, still to come on today's programme. Adam is in Yorkshire, meeting a couple who overcame the challenges of their exposed site to create a wonderful garden.
Was this here when you came?
No, it was not. It's taken us 33 years.
33 years?
Yeah.
And we meet an architect who's taken the idea of outdoor living to a whole new level.
This isn't so much the dining room area, but the actual dining room for the house. This is where we have family gatherings, we can have a party here, we can even move the table to one side, and we've got a bit of a dance floor.
Now I'm knocking up a seed mixture, and for seeds you don't need as much nutrition as you do for potting, but you need a nice open, loose mixture. What I'm sowing now are brassicas for next year. We're at that time of year when we need to be planning what vegetables we want next spring and even in some cases next summer. For the moment I'm just thinking about the leafy brassicas, the cabbages and the broccoli. And you can see I've got here some purple sprouting broccoli that I tend to plant later on. And that was sown about 2 months ago now. But I won't harvest it till early next spring or late winter, maybe February if we're lucky. So what I'm going to sow now is for next April at the earliest, and maybe even next May or early June. We need to be thinking that far ahead. Now when you're sowing a seed, fill a seed tray with this nice loose mix. I'm not going to tamp it down and stuff, I'm just going to level it. And what I'm going to sow to start with are purple sprouting broccoli, and this is claret. And the reason I do this is to follow on from this. So this will give me a harvest February, March, and what I sow now will be for April, May. So that idea of succession. So got some seeds there. So we'll just sprinkle those lightly on. Don't need to do too many. You want each seedling, right from germination, to have enough room to grow a decent root system. Now we'll just push those down in. Again, I'm not compacting them. I'm just firming it in slightly, covering it over lightly. Doesn't have to be a thick layer. Label it. I will soak that, put it somewhere warm. It doesn't have to be a heated mat. A windowsill will do fine at this time of year. The seedlings will start to appear in about 5 days and be ready to prick out maybe in about 2 to 3 weeks. They won't be ready to plant out till October, and they will barely grow over winter. So don't expect too much from them. Now, a few weeks ago, Adam went up to Yorkshire to visit the garden of Richard and Sarah Cundall, who, despite conditions that were far from perfect, have created, over the last 30 years, something special.
The Yorkshire Wolds are the most northerly chalk hills in the UK, rising 246 metres above sea level and exposed to the cold easterly winds coming from the North Sea. As stunning as this is, creating a garden in this undulating landscape does not come without its issues. "39 years ago, husband and wife duo Richard and Sarah Cundall acquired the 19th century farm as newlyweds and began to make a garden from nothing. We are sat in the glorious garden, but what was it like when you arrived?
Very bleak, Adam, very bleak. Windy and with no garden.
So literally just a farmyard?
It was a farm, yeah.
What was the first thing you did?
Built a shelter belt, or planted a shelter belt, I should say, to the south side.
To the south side. So
Yeah.
was there anything existing on the east and the north?
We had a 100-year-old plantation on the north side protecting us, and we didn't really have anything to the south, so we put in another shelter belt.
Yeah. So, I mean, in theory, the winds from that direction are warmer.
Warmer, but just as windy. We planted it with Scots pine and larch because we thought that was the quickest growing tree, which was perhaps not the best trees to be planting, really.
You can see from your face that every little step you've learned something from this journey.
Yeah, a lot. Yes.
So we've got this space now. Who started the idea of designing the garden?
Well, what we did to start off with, we just did a little square garden at the front of the house.
Yeah.
With a fence. We put a fence up to protect it and planted things like spireas and Philadelphus and sort of had shrubs in like soldiers. Azaleas, because we liked them. And then we realised after a couple of years that the azaleas all went yellow. They just didn't like it because we've got a high pH.
Exactly. So you're chalk, which means you're very sort of high pH levels, alkaline
Absolutely.
soil.
Absolutely. So that was all to learn because we knew nothing.
We were learning a bit.
We were learning a lot.
Yeah. But isn't that the joy?
It's been a long time, Adam, but it's 39 years. But yes, I mean, yeah, it's a journey, but it's been certainly fun, yeah.
And I think also the more you know, you realise how little you know.
Yeah.
I think that's a real thing,
Yeah.
you know.
But it gets under your skin.
Yeah, it does.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Those trees sort of create a fortress all around the garden. They embrace it. And you know they've created a microclimate in here. Because look at that. That is Cercidophyllum japonicum, and it's the candyfloss tree. And when you look closely, there is not a blemish on the leaves. Which tells you, you know, even in a small garden, if you're in an exposed area, that shelter belt is so important.
And there's an even further barrier that Richard and Sarah exploited while developing the garden.
Richard, roses will grow in quite a diverse mix of conditions, but you're not far from the coast. It's chalk, it blows a gale, and it's freezing cold in the winter.
It's certainly cold, yeah, yeah.
So when you decide that actually we're going to create a rose garden?
Well, we didn't have much shelter, and we had this redundant cattle yard. So it suddenly became obvious to make a garden in this area.
Redundant cattle yard. That doesn't strike me that it's necessarily going to have the best depth of soil going on.
No, we had to create the soil, so we got a digger in to take the rubble out. And then I was advised to put as much farmyard manure in the bottom, which we had, and then we put topsoil on the top. Yeah. So it's a false landscape in here, really.
So actually, you could describe it more as a rose paradise now. You've created and...
Well, they seem to like it.
They do.
Over the other side of the garden is a wildflower meadow, something that you would expect to thrive on the natural, thin, chalky soil.
Now, that is something. And I think in reality, probably poor soil, chalky. I was expecting a little bit of this to a point. So was this here when you came, or?
No, it was not. It's taken us 33 years.
33 years?
Yeah, because when we came and we thought we want to have a meadow, chickens were reared on it.
Ah, right.
So it was very, very fertile, which we didn't realise at the time was so difficult for a meadow. And so what we did was we power harrowed it.
Yeah.
Chucked on wildflower seed, and then up came docks and nettles for 5 years. And so we just kept mowing it, and we deadheaded the docks. And then about 15 years ago, we introduced this rattle, this yellow flower.
And then straight away the grass started to weaken, and your seed got away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, but we still manage it the same way. What we do every sort of August is we top it, and we take everything off as if we were making hay, and then we keep it really short in the autumn as if we were sheep.
Yeah.
You know, like the original meadows were, and that seems to work. And then about 5 years ago, we found these pyramid orchids, you see.
That's like the icing on the cake, isn't it?
You're right. Then, more excitingly for us, then we've had the odd bee orchid.
That's
and
incredible.
so that was just the best thing. 29 years of mowing it and deadheading docks, and then suddenly, finally, a bee orchid.
See, all worth it.
Yeah.
All worth it. Richard and Sarah have developed a real understanding of this land, and this really demonstrates it. It's an old dew pond. It's a man-made watering hole, so it's clay-lined, and livestock would come and have a drink. They topped it up with soil, but they've used that clay lining to retain the moisture, and you only have to look at the plants. Look at the persicarias, the regersias, the royal ferns over there. They look so good, fresh and happy, which is incredible. Just drifted off into the woodland, and instantly atmosphere's changed. You can hear the rain and everything calms down. But the plants that are singing are the shrubs. You look through there where the trees are, and you come down to that next layer. Things like the Philadelphus, the Deutzias, the hydrangeas, creating that shrub layer in our garden. And yeah, in here they're big, but most of those plants we can get more compact varieties. And what they do is, yeah, they create shape, form, they lead you through the space, but on top of that, they're great for wildlife. You soon forget that this garden sits in quite a challenging landscape, but there's still the designer in me thinking, but the views are beautiful. Should we open it up here, there, reconnect? And then you realise that Richard and Sarah have been here for nearly 40 years. They understand the site. And the moment you open the garden up to the elements, this garden just wouldn't be the same. And it is stunning.
I thought it was really interesting, Adam's point, that as a designer, he wanted to cut holes in the barrier around the garden so he could use the borrowed landscape. But Richard and Sarah know their garden, and they know that the wind is an enemy that they cannot beat unless they close it off. And I can empathise with that, because here at Longmeadow, when we came, which is 32 years ago now, this was a completely open site. And the first thing I did was plant trees around the outside and hedges to create these small areas that are sheltered. And if we didn't have those hedges, I couldn't grow these plants. The Paradise Garden, of course, is dominated by these enormous lilies. This is a variety called Gizmo. And they're brash, and they're bold, and they're vulgar, and they're lovely. They're fantastic. And not only do they look good in this sort of dramatic way, but the whole garden is suffused in their extraordinary fragrance. It's time now to go to one of your gardens, and this one is not so far from here. It's on an allotment just outside Gloucester.
Hello Gardener's World, my name is Amir, and welcome to my allotment plot in Gloucestershire. At my allotment, I enjoy growing lots of fruit and veg, but I also enjoy inviting the wildlife to my garden. We have a lot of molehills on our allotment site, and rather than view them as a nuisance, I appreciate them. And this year I have collected a bucket full of this super fine molehill soil, and I have sown my carrot seeds in it. I am pleased to report that so far they are looking promising. This year I have decided to direct sow my sweet corn. The ground is warm and this is a nice sunny spot, ideal to help the seeds germinate. I'm just levelling the soil with this rake. And take a look at this. In just a week, our first signs of sweet corn. Thank you for joining me and happy gardening.
Well, as Amir has found, molehills are really useful. They are a fantastic resource for the gardener because they contain all that living matter, the bacteria, the fungi, the nematodes that are essential for healthy plant growth. Well, as you can see, I'm harvesting my potatoes. These are a first early variety. I've not grown them before. They're called Caledonian Pearl. And they've suffered really because it has been so dry. I'm going to clear the bed because I want to use it for the next stage of succession. I've disturbed a little toad in the corner that would have been hunkered down by the edge of the boards. We have a lot of toads in the garden, and they're great for controlling slugs, so welcome. If it was a lovely sunny day, I would spread these out on the surface and let them dry for a bit. but it's threatening rain, so there's no point in that. I will take them straight to storage. And when you're storing potatoes, you must keep them cool and absolutely dark, and the dark is essential. Because if there is any light, they will react by turning green, and the green is poisonous. These will store at least till Christmas, but my guess is we'll eat these up in the next few weeks because they're at their best freshly harvested, because new potatoes, first earlies, have that lovely sweetness that main crop don't have. Now, we all use our gardens for different purposes, but Jenny Lewin in Sussex uses her garden more than most.
I spend as much time in the garden as is possible. So if I can eat outside, work in the garden, do my socialising, family time, so much the better. And the house is your cosy little burrow to return to at night. So actually very like the animals that live here. I'm Jenny. This is my little end of terrace cottage. Used to be one building, the quarantine house for Midhurst, and the house is very small, but I've got this lovely big garden. This is the only flat area that's attached to the house, and so this is where a lot of the utilitarian stuff happens. I'm an architect by trade. If I was designing a house for somebody, I would be using certain elements, the staircase, the arrival spot. So what I've done with the garden really is take elements that you might want in your house and place them outside. So I don't have a big staircase in the house, but I've got a big staircase out here. I don't have a dining room in the house, but I've got a lovely dining room outside. If I had the choice between a large house and a small garden, or a large garden and a small house, I'd take the garden any time, because it's just there's so much freedom in the garden to make the spaces that you want to make. So this is my grand staircase. Everything is just laid on the sand, so the staircase itself becomes another planting area, and then it just softens the whole view as you look up to this wonderful bank of trees behind. What I really enjoy about the start of my day is having that little look around the garden. It is very easy to get distracted, but it really is time to go to work now. It's about 11 o'clock now, and this is one of my favourite spots to sit in. Everything seems to cohabit very happily. It's very important to me to not disturb that ecology. I'm reusing salvage materials. I'm very happy for the self-seeding plants to find their home, and not trying to force a design upon the garden. The little geraniums in here are actually from my grandmother's garden. So there's quite a nice little connection there. Plants that have been given to me by my sister, thinnings from her garden, and so most of the planting in the garden has been handed on to me. From here, I really enjoyed the backlit smoke tree. I love Canterbury bells, foxgloves, achillea, marguerites, daisies, iris. It's a very kind of modest palette of planting I've got here, but I think it suits the edge of woodland, slightly wild look. So the lovely thing about working from an office in the garden is that I can have a little wander about whenever I want to. And also, with the work I'm doing, quite often we'll find waste materials, and the paths I've been experimenting with, which are made out of sawdust, waste material from a joinery workshop. And I found that if I spread this around, I can refresh it in the spring once a year, and then I let the leaves fall on it, and it becomes quite similar to a woodland path. It's soft underfoot. You could scrape this sawdust back, and you'd still find worms and a healthy soil underneath. Nothing has to be wasted. So this isn't so much the dining room area, but the actual dining room for the house. This is where we have family gatherings, friends and so forth, and I've treated it very much as a domestic space. So we have our timber floor, we've got a bar. I do have a sideboard. I've got 4 types of mint growing on the sideboard there, so that is the mojito bar. And using little pot plants, almost like you would do house plants. And a bit of art on the wall with little snail shells and whatever I find might well get popped up there. We can have a party here. We can even move the table to one side and we've got a bit of a dance floor. I think the more domestic the space looks, the more you're likely to use it. I've certainly found that we've never actually been rained off. But if the temperature's not quite right, then we'll just put a coat on. With the steep slope here, I don't actually have the space for your traditional herbaceous border. If you were to see it on a drawing, you would see 3 circles of stone coming onto a rectangular space, you know, the dining room, and then using organic, more sinuous shapes to pull those spaces together and let the self-seeding fluff all the edges of the hard lines. The place I really like to go is my greenhouse. It's a second-hand aluminium frame, and I've actually put a little bed in there. I do have some tomatoes and a few strawberries, and there's a grapevine hanging overhead. And I have actually lain there and picked a grape from the vine or a strawberry by just stretching out my hand. So that sense of abundance and the fruits of nature is very, very lovely. As we move down the garden, it gets more and more lightly managed with just mown paths. The very end of the garden gets the last drop of evening sun. So I've built what might be a veranda on a house, but again, it's a building or an area that's detached from the house, and I've actually built it where you want it to be. When I do go down there, or maybe even spend a night down there, I'm feeling like I'm in nature. So you've got all the excitement of camping in nature, but yet the house is only, you know, a short walk away. It feels very safe, and it feels, again, just like I'm joining in with the other things that are going on here. The owls are hooting, the little muntjac deer or a fox might walk by. As time has gone on, the garden has really become more and more of a family space that we can share. Cheers!
Cheers, guys.
Thank you,
To
Dan.
summer.
And that's really the joy of it. It's a lovely thing to do.
I think Jenny's point, which, although simple, is really true, that if you want to use part of your garden for domestic purposes, eating or parties or whatever, make it nice, make it agreeable so it's dry and it's comfy and maybe got cushions and decoration, and then you certainly will use it much more. Come on then, let's take this out. I'm going to back out. Come on, good boy. I've raked over the potato patch, and I'm going to plant purple sprouting broccoli. In fact, the same plants that I showed you in the potting shed earlier. But before I do so, I'm going to add the compost, because all brassicas respond really well to a little boost, and compost is perfect. You don't need to add a lot. Just sprinkle it over the surface like this, and then rake it even. And compost reinvigorates the soil. Right, that's ready. And then we've got these plants. Now, As I said earlier, these were sown a couple of months ago, so they're fairly reasonable sized plants, but they will get much bigger. Purple sprouting broccoli will grow in a raised bed up to my head height, and they need space, so don't plant them too close together. That is very nice. What you're looking for is you want to be able to see the roots, but also see the soil, which holds perfectly well when you hold it like that. Now, I'm going to plant these in this. I'm making quite a deep hole, put it round, and then push it in really firmly. And that's important with all brassicas. If you're growing cabbages, cauliflowers, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, plant them deep and plant them firmly because they need to be anchored. Then the roots will grow out. You won't damage them in any way. So I will grow 3 across, like this. And they go like that. That's nice and firm. And then give it the same sort of spacing in this direction. Right, I'll fill the rest of this bed up using this grid. But while I'm doing that, here are your jobs for this weekend. Slightly larger pot and place some fresh compost underneath and around the roots. Water them, and you should see renewed growth very soon. At this time of year, ponds can very quickly develop a layer of algae or weed. So it's a good idea to regularly clean this off by scooping it gently from the surface. Put this material right by the edge of the pond and leave it for at least a day to allow all small creatures to find their way back into the water. And then it can be added to the compost heap. Heleniums are one of my favourite late summer flowers, and the bees love them too. They're absolutely crawling with bees. Many of them are our own honeybees, but there are solitary bees, there's 1 or 2 wasps, there's flies. This is a variety called Sahin's early flower. And then there'll be other varieties coming through which will take us into autumn. But for the moment, their richness, both of colour and presumably of taste and nutrition for the bees, is unmatched by anything else in the garden. Well, that's it for today. I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next Friday at 8 o'clock. So until then, bye-bye.